Hello and welcome to our channel. Once again, this is Nuera. So this is a continuation of our previous video where we talked about Python variables in theory. So in today's tutorial, we are going to talk about Python variables but in real coding, as in real practice. Remember, in our previous video we saw that variables were containers or stores for storing our data within our program. So we saw the rules for creating variables, the way we could assign variables, for example, the single assignments and the multiple assignments, and why we use variables. So in today's tutorial, we are going to just emphasize all what we talked about in the theory part. So remember, we said that if you to create a variable, you needed three things. One was the variable name, and the other thing was the assignment operator and a value to store. So we saw that if you to create a variable, you would use an equal sign, and an equal sign we called it an assignment operator. So you will find out that in Python, the equal sign we know in the normal world we live in, it doesn't work as the equal sign in Python. It's called an assignment operator. For example, if I was to create a variable or a container to store a number, maybe I want to store my lucky number 20, I would just come and do something like maybe number. I could give it. So this first statement I'm creating, this is as in all the first arrow or the first part, it's the variable name. Then I would put an equal sign, and the equal sign, remember I've talked of it as the assignment operator. Then I will provide the value maybe 20. So the value I'm providing, the 20, is the one that is being stored in the container we named number. So in a sense, it's like this number or the variable name is containing this 20. So if you want to access the 20, for example, I would like to print out this 20, somebody will do something like this 20. So in this case, I would be hard coding the value. But in real sense, I could just call what I named my variable. So I would just call number, and it will still do the same. So when you run this, it will still give you a 20. So we saw that variables could take in any data type, as in they are not restricted to any data type. For example, this and this and this. So you could store any data type within your variables. For example, I could store maybe floating point numbers, I could store strings, I could store maybe the booleans or complex numbers. So for example, I could create maybe a variable name to store a string. So let me do Nuera. I could go ahead and store maybe a boolean. Let me call this GPA. Let me just do 5.0. And the other thing is, the way I'm writing these things, it's all about organizing my work. But you could do something like maybe a boolean is male. Then even if you don't put the spaces I've been putting, and you do something like this, it will still be a valid variable. But in your sense, you would like to organize your code, so it's better you put space here and space to make your code look more organized. So this is basically what you need to know when you're creating variables. But when we talk of the rules for declaring variables, as in what are the do's and don'ts, as in what should I follow and what shouldn't I follow. For example, we saw that in our first rule, variables must start with a letter or an underscore, and according to the variable names we have used here, for example, number, name, GPA, then Ismail, they all begin with letters. So the other thing you could do, they can start with maybe an underscore. For example, I could put here an underscore. So when you use this underscore, it's like it's still valid and it will still work. It's a valid variable name. But now you see that it's grayed out, so that we are going to see in our future tutorials where to use the underscores when you are creating, especially when we will be in classes. We shall see how we can use the underscores to make more complex or to restrict data. But now just know that they can be used to create variable names. Then the other thing was variables couldn't start with numbers, so you cannot begin a variable name with a number. For example, instead of an underscore, I can put something like 1. So the moment I put 1, you will see that our program, all our variable name will get some red line below it. So that red line is indicating an error, and when you come and you look at your file name, you see that it's containing one error. So always keep in mind that the moment you start with a number, it won't work. But in your sense, not starting with a number does not imply that you cannot use numbers when you're creating variables. So I can put it at the end and it will still be variable. So this is valid. So this implies that you can use numbers but not at the start. Always keep in mind that we are not restricting you to using numbers, but it's like you can use numbers as long as they are not beginning the variable name. Then the other thing was you cannot use special characters when you're creating variables. For example, a special character maybe a question mark. So the moment you put a question mark within your variable name, it becomes invalid. And you see that they will show that you're having now 3 errors. So this implies that it broke it here, and even the question mark is also invalid. Then the other thing is you cannot have spaces within your variable name, so that can never work. For example, if somebody wanted to create maybe first name and put space, the moment you do that, you will create an error within your program. So to avoid that, somebody could join this with an underscore. So that will be variable. Or you could change the moment you see an underscore within a variable name, we'll call that one a snake case. Now if I want to use another casing, I'll just change the N to capital and we'll call this one the Pascal case. But normally in Python we stick with the snake case, so you can leave it at that. Then the other thing was we talked of you use valid, as in I won't call them valid variables or valid variable names, but I will just call them, you use things that can easily be understood globally. For example, maybe I'm interested in storing a password of a system or a user password. Then I just do something, maybe x equals maybe to 1 2 3 4 5. So x being assigned to a string 1 2 3 4 up to 5 is right, and it's a valid variable name. But in real sense, when you give it to somebody, when you are known there, or when you are working with a team, will they be able to understand that x had stored the password? So always keep in mind that use variable names that are descriptive. They have to be short, but they must show the real image of the data you are storing into that variable. For example, now this was a password. I could just maybe say passkey. It depends on what you want, or even you can do password. It could still work. Then the last thing about the variables was you cannot use reserved keywords. So when we talk of reserved keywords are like some statements or some words within the Python language that are reserved for the Python interpreter. So you cannot use them. For example, I can't use something like if. In this case, it will be invalid. So if you use if, it will become invalid. You can't use something like maybe pass. So these are reserved keywords as we are going to see them. We use them to do specific tasks. So I cannot just use them to create variables. Now let us talk about the assignments as our last chapter. So now when we talk of the assignments, as you see these assignments we have been doing here above, it's like number 1 being assigned to 20. So this is a single assignment. But let me even remove this. But remember, we saw that in Python we had what we call the multiple assignment. So what are multiple assignments? Multiple assignments mean that you're going to assign more than one variable name or more than one value at a point, all in a single line. For example, I could have something like x. Now let me use these simple for the interest of time, y, but never use them when you're doing real code. Z being assigned to maybe 10, 20, maybe let me do this 30. Now when you look at these values, they have to match with the value. So the values on the left hand side, they have to match with the values on your right hand side. This implies that if I'm having three variable names this side, even the values they are corresponding to, they have to be 3. So the moment I remove one, for example this, and I try running this code, it will throw an error, as we shall see when we start running our code. So make sure that they all match. So if you're having three variable names, make sure that you are having 3 values on your right hand side. Now when you look at this assignment in line 10, it's saving you some wastage of time. For example, somebody could do something like this to do the same line up there. You could do something like x, you assign it maybe to 10, then you come y, you assign it to 20, then even z, you assign it to 30. So this will be valid, but in real sense it will be just wastage of time. So it will be better if somebody uses this first approach we saw, when you do just multiple assignments for different values, as long as the variable names, as in the number of variable names, matches with the number of values on the right hand side. Then the other thing would be if you want to assign multiple variable names the same values. For example, I would like to assign maybe even y to contain 10 and even z to contain 10. So writing 3 lines to do this would be just wastage of time. So the easiest approach could be, you could get x, then you assign it to y, because it will show the same value, then you assign it still to z, then you go further to assign it to the value 10. This implies that x represents 10, y still represents 10, and z still represents 10. So basically this is what we covered in that theory when we talk about coding.